Good morning. Sorry about the camera. I was trying to make a couple adjustments before I started. So the first 40 seconds, you're going to see me messing with the camera. I'm still working on a couple of things that I'd like to change. So today is January 7th, 2026. And today I want to talk about some various topics. Okay, here we go. So, as promised, I want to be a little bit more organized. Yesterday, well, actually Monday, I was tweaking what I wanted to say, etc. So, and have my notes available. So I have them. I have my notes available this morning. So with this podcast, I want to follow a certain format. So the first segment will be if I were running for governor of Illinois, like I said last time. The second one would be legislative actions that affect the Metro East, because I live in O'Fallon area. And then talk about what I talked about with the federal government policy, add some new information to that. So I think that it'll be fun. So let's get started. Okay. So as I was saying, um, if I'm running for governor, and I'm hoping that my Republican counterparts will tune into my program and really to take it seriously that the Republican platform needs to change if we have any shot at winning a statewide election. Now, as I previously stated, not only do we need to change the governorship from Democrat to Republican, we also need to turn some legislature seats uh, Republic in the Democratic House and the Democratic Senate, which are super majorities in both of those, to Democrat. So in November, what I'm saying is, in order for us to be able to come in and have a Republican governor, we also need more Republicans in the legislature. Why? Because the legislature initiates all of the laws, and I'll go through some of that and be specific. Okay, so let's dig into why we need a new governor, preferably a Republican governor in Illinois. So there are issues. First one would be the public safety and crime. So the criminal justice reform package has led to a catch and release system for violent offenders by ending cash bail and limiting judicial discretion in cities like Chicago. I mentioned that briefly. It's the safety law, and the safety law seems to focus on protecting criminals more than people who are abiding by the laws in Illinois. And specifically, the cashless bail, like I previously said, now I can give it some more detail. When you have a cashless bail, and then you make it so that it's easier for the criminal to say, well, I'm not going to do it again, or I understand that I can't do stuff. I can't go out and commit more crimes. Well, how about the victims that you've already done stuff to, or the actions that you've taken? Now, we are the only state that I know of that's done cashless bail so far. We need to amend that to say, especially if you've killed someone, you cannot get out of jail. Now, those modifications would be a start. What you also need to do is you need to start doing audits on it. We need to look at the track record of, hey, if somebody committed robbery and is cashless bail, did they go back out and commit crimes? Did they do different crimes, etc.? So that's what the focal point needs to be. Now, I looked at some crime stats, and it's a mixed bag. My opinion is in Illinois, we need to reduce crime greater than what we've done. And I'm looking at the governor's tenure. Now, remember something. We just came out of the pandemic, probably in 21, going into 2022. Now, and you can check this out, when everybody was on lockdown, crime almost went to zero for 8 months. Now, that is a metric that no one, including the mainstream media, hasn't talked about. So if you look at uh, Chicago, because that's WGN, and one of the reasons why I do this program is that in the Metro East, we don't hear about anything except for St. Louis City, which I said previously. So, what needs to be done is that we need to really start tracking these metrics. And also, any crime is bad, especially if it is serious crime. So, the statistics tell us that uh, there was a decrease in violent crime statewide, and there were uh, violent crime went down in trends. So I would submit to you that during the winter months, my observation has been that crime goes down a little bit because people don't like being outside. And a lot of these are just happening with carjackings, uh, disrupting the Metro Link, killing people outside, and all of those things. Well, the criminals like it when it's warmer outside because you can go back and look that the crime spikes in the summertime. Why? Because everybody's outside then. And for whatever reason, well, we'd have to have experts tell us in criminology, not reporters writing for different news agencies to tell us why people like committing more crimes in the summer. We don't know why. So if we get back to this, the main takeaway is there's been fluctuations between 3 to 5%, but during certain time periods, it fluctuates up higher. Now, when we had the National Guard come into Chicago, and it wasn't even downtown, it was a town that was in Cook County. Um, Crime did go down. Well, why did it go down? Observation that the criminals knew uh, that the National Guard was here, and they did not want to start anything with them. So that seemed like that it was a good result. But if I were running for governor, I would accept help from the federal government. If for no other reason, in Cook County at least, let's give the police officers there time to recover from the massive amounts of crime during these peak times, especially like in the summer. Then they can do more training, they can talk strategy, etc. So having someone like a National Guard entity coming into the state in high crime areas, I believe that that could reduce crime, and then your police officers could get a break to recover, get re-energized, and then they would be ready to go back out there and to um, keep crime lower and be vigilant and be places. Speaking of that, a sidebar, I believe that we need to pay the police more money. They're under constant threat. They work long hours. Can you imagine the vigilance that it takes? So that means that people burn out a lot sooner. And we need the cream of the crop. You get what you pay for in Illinois. And if they, meaning the police, fire departments, got paid more money, they had benefits, that's what attracts talent. We need to attract talent. Okay. So we talked about crime and the fact that we need to do more to make sure that crime goes down, and we can do that through legislation. Now, the legislation has to be fair, and to tell you the truth, what all we really need to do is start enforcing the law. As you know, we vote for the attorney general in Illinois. So if the attorney general is liberal, and it looks like that the one that's attorney general now is liberal, we have to look at, is he looking out for Illinoisans in the state, or is he looking out for the progressives in enforcement of the law? So the governor enforces the law in Illinois. So there's a disconnect when the attorney general could potentially be in a different party. So the governor can't enforce the law if the attorney general is from a different party and sees things differently. So maybe we need to go back to having the governor appoint the attorney general, at least in Illinois. I know other states do the same thing, and maybe maybe it would be the wave effect of the legislature, the governorship, and the attorney general. So we need to think about doing a straight ticket for Republicans so that the governor can do his or her job. Okay. All right. So there have been some issues with immigration in this state as well. Under Governor Pritzker, we have sanctuary state policy. So I alluded to it, but under Governor Pritzker's leadership, uh, there is no cooperation between ICE and local and state officials in the state of Illinois, which I think is wrong, because there needs to be that coordination so that people who are in the state illegally can go back to their home country. And on my podcast, I always talk about this notion of there seems to be a blur between being here legally and being here illegally. It looks like the state of Illinois, under that sanctuary city policy, is saying that it can be anyone who makes it to Illinois, no matter what their status is. They are the ones who get free care. They're immune from the law as long as they aren't committing crimes. But it is a crime to be here illegally. And so a governor can't say, well, I'm just not going to follow the federal law. So if I were running for governor, I would change that. we have to enforce the law. Now, we Republicans in the state, if you're here legally, we will follow the law if you're here legally. Now, if you've been here a long time, say 10 or 15 years, and your paperwork runs out and you just don't update it, okay, well, just go update it, pay the fee, and keep your life going. But let's get away from uh, making it into a national agenda on people who are here illegally. And what I mean is, yes, there was a case where someone had been here, I think that they were from Staunton, Illinois, and they just didn't update their paperwork. I wouldn't deport them. I would make them go and update their paperwork, pay any fines and fees, and then move on with it. There's not a lot of people that we know of that are actually doing that, but they are here illegally if they haven't updated their paperwork. That's just how it is. Um, Moving on to the economic portion of this. So there's been a criticism about taxes in this country with in Illinois with who's paying the bulk of the taxes in the state. And like I said, I believe that we should abolish the income tax and do a personal tax. Now, this has been being done in other states. And initially, people would say, well, where are we going to get the money from? Well, you can do that in several forms with the personal tax. And as I move forward with this segment of this, I'll tell you specifically how we're going to do it. So currently, since Governor Pritzker has been governor, there's been, and the legislature has raised all kind of taxes, including tollway taxes. It's a high cost of living. We can see that with groceries. See, we can't blame the federal government for that because those are set locally. And how are those done? Well, in O'Fallon currently, there is a tax on groceries. Now, Illinois had that, a state tax on that. They got rid of it last summer. Well, why did they do that? Well, this is an election year. Of course, they're going to get rid of it. But if we put Governor Pritzker back in there, where that sales tax is going to come back. Now, why are they doing that in general? They're doing that. One of the big reasons is because of this influx of people into the state of Illinois who have needs. And like I told you from Monday, they're going to get the money from someone. Now, if you have a Republican in there, which would be whoever's running, and if I were governor, you bring in business. You start projects where you build things through construction, things like that. You don't put all of your money into fixing the crime socially. And that's the big difference in philosophy. Republicans create opportunities. Democrats throw money at it. And that's what we've been doing. And economically, the last several years, there's been a fuel tax. I feel it every time I put gas in my vehicle. And it's not going to stop. And it has to be fair. We need a fair tax system so that everyone is involved. Think about this. Most churches, no matter what the denomination is, they're part of a community. While in the church community, everybody contributes, even if it's not a large sum of money, but they contribute. Look at what churches can do. Churches can build bigger facilities, they can put gyms in there, they can fix their parking lot, and everybody in the community pays for it. And if they can do that, let's start thinking of the state as a community and what we want to do to rebuild it. Not say, well, if you are working and you make a certain amount, the burden is in Illinois for you to pay more. And one of the big things that I see is that we property taxes have gone off of the rails. And I want to talk about alternatives like the lottery money. They tax cigarettes now. Where is the money going? We need audits on that. And I'll dig more into that later on because I've got another part of the segment I want to do. So far, I've talked about, hey, if I were running for governor, what I would do, blending that with some of the legislative things that are going on in the state. So the reason that I really want to hit two more points with legislative actions in the Metro East, we probably don't know most of what's going on in the state. The news in the Metro East is focused on St. Louis City and County. And also, if you listen to the WGN news, which I do, is focused on Chicago. It's all Cook County news. You would think that the rest of the state doesn't exist. And I'm telling you, Illinoisans, we need a voice in this state. And it is unfair for the rest of the state through the governor to just tax us and tell us, hey, we don't feel like that you are important enough for us to even report on you unless it's an election year. And then you see Governor Pritzker down here. So locally and in the legislature, this is why the legislature is important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast. Okay, so there were two initiatives or bills that the Republicans, the greatly minority legislatures in the House and Senate were trying to get pushed through. Now, predominantly, the House of Representatives, it kind of mimics the federal government. They make the proposals for the laws. And here's two of them. So one of them was for property tax relief. So they wanted to provide that the State Board of Education shall establish and administer a program to award property tax relief grants to school districts in this state. So it will provide, in exchange for receiving a grant, a school district's maximum aggregate property tax extension for the taxable year that begins January 1st of the fiscal year for which the grant is awarded may not exceed an adjusted maximum aggregate property tax, which basically would give taxpayers in that school district a break. Because if you have additional money, why don't you deduct from how much you want to charge the citizens to pay bills? Now, This bill was brought up January of last year and is still in committee. The second one, Senior Freeze Medicare. It amends the property tax code in a provision concerning the low income senior citizens assessment freeze homestead exemption provides beginning in taxable year 2026, the taxpayer's annual household income for purposes of determining eligibility for exemption shall be reduced by any amounts paid by the taxpayer's Medicare premiums during the calendar year. Now, they did this early spring next year, still in committee. Why? Well, it's like I told you, the Democrats have a super majority, and that is not what they are focused on. They are focused on a lot of social programs that I will talk about as we go through the next several weeks. Illinois is a great state. The Metro East is a great area. And I believe through communication that we can make it better, make taxes fair, etc. But the bulk of what I'll be talking about is what's going on here and where your money is going. So now I'm going to move to the third segment. As you know, as I stated Monday, I was talking about the Trump administration versus Congress for notifications about military actions abroad. Now, we've all watched the news, so well, as much as we can handle. I'm at 30 minutes, and then I go watch Barney or something like that because it's just gotten so biased at times. So the new information that's happened is, and one of the key points that I was talking about in my podcast is that the mainstream media is acting like they are the judicial branch. And as the days go by and they run out of new information to talk about, the Venezuela and the fact that they took Maduro out of power, they're starting now to focus on if it was legal. They're starting to focus on, does Congress have to be notified? And I mentioned that last segment. And if you look at the law on the book with the War Powers Resolution, you can make your own assessment. It is not the mainstream media's job, as far as I know. So you can analyze stuff. It's been taken to a new level of scrutiny. And then you have people in Congress acting like that they are judicial people too. And then you bring in your experts or people who have been working at these news agencies, especially the more liberal ones, mainstream media outlets. And so, when is the last time that you had an expert from South America who's got a PhD that can tell you about what the people are going through? It seems like it's a soundbite because this morning, and I looked at 4 different channels. Now the people are pushing back for Maduro being pushed out of power, and that's been directed at not only the American government, it's also directed at our citizens. That how come we're letting the government in our country take someone out of power, etc. And the narrative is just changing to it being, instead of being a a law enforcement action that we're somehow invading their country, and that is very dangerous. If for no other reason, 4 or 5 years from now, Venezuela could take us to international court, to the UN, possibly do sanctions. They could try to get the federal government to pay them money, and it's all because the mainstream media's narrative, they're acting like the judicial branch. And I would remind them their job is to report it. Their job isn't to endlessly evaluate it and to bring in experts that really don't even know anything about Venezuela in the first place. So I'm excited to talk to you today, and I will do a segment on Friday, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Have a good morning and have a good rest of the week until Friday, and I will talk to you then.